Hello and welcome to this webinar on your free AML CTF program setup. And we'll also at the end talk about the AUSTRAC enrollment. So let's begin. So I'll start by introduction. My name is Giridhar Kannan, Giri. I'm the founder at MyTRAC. So if you've already gone to MyTRAC website, you can find about us. So we are doing end-to-end compliance for AML CTF. You can understand more about me, my background, and I also have another firm, which is AML SureCheck, where we specialize on independent reviews. And then there's another person, Madeline Matera, who is an expert advisor for us at MyTRAC. She's been previously an AML compliance officer for a superannuation fund, and we are happy to take you through this particular session. Now, where do we start? So you can click on login, sign up, and that will open up a new web page for you. So put in your email ID. So the person who's doing it should be someone who is responsible for the AML program in their organization. So I'm just using a test ID here to log in. So once you put in your email ID, you will get an OTP that will come. Yeah, here you go. I'm putting in my OTP that I received on my test email ID. And then it opens up a registration form. So you put in your ABN number. Now, again, this is a test ABN number that I am using. All right, so this is not a real case. Select the option accountant. I'm putting in my name. I'm putting in my mobile number. And I choose to submit, accept the privacy policy and the terms and conditions as well. Click on submit. That opens up the screen for me to do my risk assessment. So where do we start? You start on your risk assessment first. So we need to understand a few things for accountants. As a profession, the money laundering risk is pretty high as per the National Risk Assessment 2024 provided by AUSTRAC. And throughout this risk assessment document, we are using 3 risk ratings, high, medium, and low. And we go about it. What we are going to do in this particular risk assessment is understand the various designated services that you're providing, what's the inherent risk, how do you communicate with your clients, what are the channels that you use, and what type of clients you deal with, and also what's the jurisdiction. That is what we are going to do in the next 15-20 minutes. So you can just follow this. It's fairly straightforward and simple as long as you know what your practice is doing or what is your risk appetite. Now, when I say the risk, we call them as inherent risk. So what do you mean by inherent risk? Is nothing but the risk that exists by default just because we are offering a professional service or we are talking or doing things for a particular type of customer or we are dealing in a particular jurisdiction. So this is what we call as inherent risk. When we are going to accept that risk, or we say we do not accept those risks, we need to have some controls or measures that are put in place to ensure that how we manage and mitigate the risk. So that's what we're going to do in this risk assessment. So without much ado, I will start. So the first thing is basically about the various types of professional services that you are offering. So you can say answer yes, no. So I'm just using this. So if you want to understand more, you can click on the description. Or if you know the answer straight away, you can click on it. So for each one of them, you can definitely do that. Now, for this purpose video, I'm just randomly choosing as yes and no. But for your own practice, please do whatever is relevant. It's a good idea to keep saving as you move on. And once this is done, the next step, what you will be doing is, we're talking about the risk factors here. Now, every risk factor, there is a description. What you need to presume is whether, given the scenario, will you deal or accept or do this particular thing is what we're trying to understand here. So if you say yes, that's absolutely fine. That's your business decision. However, if you choose to say no, then what happens is you need to understand and write how are you going to prevent that from not happening. So I'm going to say, for the purpose of this meeting, I'm going to say a no for most of the items, but just letting you know. All right. So I'm saying we do not deal with or we do not facilitate high value transactions as this is not within our debt. Physical cash transactions, if you don't accept physical cash, then you can say no, we do not accept cash and ask our clients to transfer funds electronically to our bank account. Okay, so you can say that. Virtual currencies, no, we don't deal with virtual assets. It's not about your client's personal dealing. It's about you dealing with your clients on virtual assets. So we do not deal with virtual assets as this is not within our appetite. Anonymous legal structure. So what this means is we all as a profession create those legal structures, but then quickly to understand what's the level of structure or layers that are being created. So if it is going to be very anonymous or difficult, would you do that? So you can say yes, or you can say no. Now, for everything that you do, there is an inherent risk rating that is already predefined. If you wish, you can change it, but I suggest not because these are the guidelines from AUSTRAC. So let's say if you don't do that, then I'm going to just say that, we do not create legal structures that are anonymous. Any unusual service request. So if your client has some request that has no apparent economic or legal purpose or involves very large or complex transactions, if you don't say no, then you can say we do not accept requests that has no apparent economic or legal purpose. Use of trust accounts. So most of the practices don't use trust accounts. So you can say no, but it says, I'll tell you why we're asking this. Let's say you're using it only for the purpose of tax refund for the clients, that's fine. But many times we have seen clients asking that the money be transferred to a third party for tax refund. So these are all opportunities for using your as a money law for the purposes of money laundering. So that is why it is very important to know. So we do not have trust accounts. That's it. I do that, and then I move on to my next screen. Okay, here is something which is very unique to us. What we're trying to understand here is how much of designated services revenue is something that contributes to your overall income. For example, you earn $100 as a total revenue. In the very first page, I answered yes to a few questions to say these are the designated services that our practice provides. Now, a combination of that, the sum total of all that revenue, does that exceed 30% of your total revenue or not? The reason is simply because this is just a threshold that says that if this is not my primary source, then my risk is relatively less from a money laundering perspective because I do other services like advisory or tax keeping or or tax filing or bookkeeping. So in that case, I would say if it is not so, our annual revenue from designated services does not exceed 30% of our total revenue. The next question is, in the next 12 months, are you anticipating another designated service that you listed other than those above going to go up? So do you expect any of the services to reach 30%? If not, just say NA. The next question is, are you likely to add any new designated services in the next 12 months? So if you've answered yes to 4 of those items, do you think you will add any of them in the next 12 months? If you say no, then the answer is no or not applicable. The last point here is, whenever as a practice, if you're using AI, we are living in a world where we are required to use this, or you use virtual assistants or chatbots to basically onboard or engage first-time clients. Please ensure and remember that you are vulnerable for risk. The client can fake their identity. There are a lot of risks involved. So you can just say yes, we are aware of the risks. Save it, and then now we have done the designated services risk assessment. Next, we move on to the designated channels. So how do you provide service to your client? In person, email, telephone, WhatsApp, text messages, video conferencing programs such as Zoom, what we are in. Online platform is if you're using your website or any payment platform or any third-party apps that you use. If you're doing so, then say yes. Now remember, throughout this whole process, if you are unsure, the answer is yes, be it for designated service, be it for this or for anything else. So we always believe in Australia that if we are not unsure, it's better to be cautious to err on the safer side. So we will say yes. I'm just going to say yes here because I'm not sure whether I'm using credit card payment to using credit card to allow clients to pay. So I'm not sure. So maybe I'll just say yes. All right, suspected false and fraudulent activities. Just continuing on from there. Clients can totally fake their identity. We've all heard about deep fake and other things. So if you think you never had the opportunity to see the client or it's just a photo or something, you have to accept those risks. I mean, mostly we all live in a world where we cannot live without remotely onboarding clients. So most of the time the answer would be a yes. And in the next 12 months, are you likely to add any new channel? I've said no, then I'm going to say not applicable. I'll say what I'm doing as a progress, and then I move on to the next one, which is individuals and sole traders. So here we're talking about the different type of clients I'll deal with. So individual and sole traders, yes. Bodies corporate are nothing but companies, different type of companies. I say yes. Partnerships, yes. Trust accounts, yes. Association could be incorporated or unincorporated. I say yes. Government bodies can be tricky. Look, most of them or most of us don't deal with government bodies. But the question is whether do you have an appetite to deal with government bodies if they approach you in future? You can say yes or a no. Now, if you say no, the way MyTRAC works is the system will block you from onboarding a government body as a client. Then you'll have to go back and then update your risk assessment and then redo the whole thing so that you are able to onboard a government body. So for the purpose of this, I'm just going to say no. Moving on, we're talking about risk factors that are involved in this. So individuals that you suspect have committed profit generating offenses. So if you think somebody has committed an offense which isn't necessarily limited to money laundering, would you deal with them? I would say no. So what would I say? We do due diligence on clients and will not onboard those we suspect of having committed profit generating offenses. Politically exposed person are those people who are a member of parliament or the related members or someone who has previously not been or related to them. So it could be even previously a past politician, it could be a current politician as well. So if you say yes, so this is domestic, so you can say yes. But if you choose to say no, I do not want to deal with politicians, then you can say we do due diligence on our clients and will not accept domestic PEPs as this is outside our appetite. That's it. I'm just copying this for the purpose of the next couple of questions. Here it is about PEPs, international organizations. For example, people who have worked in senior roles in international organizations such as the United Nations. So if you don't have an appetite, you can say no, we will not accept PEPs, international organizations. As this is outside our appetite. Just correcting the spelling here. It's cool. The next one is PEPs foreign. So this means a politician or a bureaucrat of a foreign country, would they come to you as a client? Will you take? I'm going to say no. The reason why I am saying no to all the questions is if it is a no, I'm trying to explain to you what the answer can be. You can put it in your own words, to your own understanding and in your own way of thinking. But I'm just trying to put this here basically to say if it is a no, what is that we can do it. If you answer that as yes, which means you are accepting that risk. So basically you don't have a control because you're willing to take it. So for foreign PEPs. Clients, legal structures creating effective anonymity. And I'm again going to say no here. So we do due diligence on clients and do not create structures, that create effective, right? Third party for individuals is nothing but somebody who is acting like a power of attorney holder. This could be for a parent, or it could be an overseas resident who has appointed someone here locally in Australia. So whether you will accept and do service in that behalf. So you can say yes or no. Like I said, I'm just going to say no so that I can try and give you the answer. We do due diligence on our clients and will not accept third party for individuals as this is outside our appetite. The next one is clients with significant unexplained wealth. So basically what this means is, for example, I walk into you with $5 million and I ask you to help me create some structures or transfer funds or, do it. You're trying to ask me from where did I get that money, and then I'm not able to give you a reasonable answer. And then whether you take it. A reasonable answer could be that, look, I had a deceased estate, the money has come in, or some intergenerational wealth, or some distant relative was given. Now, if that is the answer, going forward from 1st of July 2026, as an accountant, under the AML CTF Act, you have every right to ask for documentary evidence, just like how a bank or a financial institution will ask, because that is definitely required, because that could be a high risk scenario. And then you need to do what is an additional or enhanced customer due diligence, which means you need to collect documentation about the source of fund and source of wealth and then do that. Previously, these things would have existed in conversation. It might remain in your mind, but now you need to have documentary evidence of having gone through those conversations as well as collecting those evidences. So either you want to go ahead and do it, you say yes, and then collect those documents. If you say no, then you need to basically say how we do it. So I just say we do due diligence on our clients and will not onboard those who are unable to explain their source of wealth, as this is outside our appetite. That's it. Charities and non-profit organizations, whether you'll work with them or not, I'm just going to say no. So I'm just copying here, I'm putting it here, and just make those changes. We do and will not onboard charities and NPOs as this is outside. Low complexity clients, a simple domestic client, an individual, or a small straightforward company legal structure. I'm sure everybody is going to say yes because the risk rating is low. Are you likely to add any new clients? So I said no to government body at the start. So I'm not likely to add them in the next 12 months. I'm going to say not applicable. It's not saved for a while. So let's just save this. Okay, moving on. Coming to the last part of the risk assessment, which is very interesting, will be the country's risk assessment. Now, think of it from a designated service perspective. I want you to read all these 4 items very clearly, very carefully, and then think of the countries outside of Australia where you have exposure because of your clients, or your clients are generally staying as a resident of another country, but they're coming here for designated services, or you're acting for some companies where the beneficial owners are overseas, but you are the local director. It could be any or many of these combinations. I'm just going to give some examples based on the hundreds of conversations we've had with accountants, typical small or mid-sized accountants. So I'll give you some examples of countries which are quite common. So I'm going to add, let's say, New Zealand. And then I'm going to add, let's say, United Kingdom. I'm adding United States, all right? Now, these are some, and then let's say Singapore. Now, other than this, I'm going to also add 2 more jurisdictions for the purpose of example. One is Papua New Guinea, because this is close to Australia, and then I'm going to give another example of Russia, all right? And you can just click that and add. Now, if you look at it, every country has something known as a risk rating based on the AML risk score. This keeps updating periodically. And he also give you the Australian sanctions, FATF, and things like that. So if you look at it, Australia, New Zealand, UK, US, Singapore are all low risk jurisdictions. So, there are not much for you from an AML risk perspective. But the example of Papua New Guinea, for example, it's a high risk jurisdiction. Why is it a high risk jurisdiction? Because there is increased FATF monitoring. It's a gray listed jurisdiction. So definitely it will be the customer is a high risk customer. You need to do additional due diligence. You need to understand more about, for example, where the money has come from. So one of the reasons for Papua New Guinea is basically, we all know it could be sometimes, about political. The reason why, certain jurisdictions are all is associated with various types of corruption. So bribery and corruption is also one type of financial crime risk. So from that perspective, you need to be very clear. So if you are onboarding a foreign PEP from a country which has high risk, then you need to be very clear that it is not bribery or corruption money. Russia, which is another example, is a high-risk jurisdiction, but it is not under any FATF monitoring. However, the Australian government has applied sanctions, so which means you cannot deal with certain, with entities or representatives that have a business interest in Russia unless and until you're very sure exactly what you're trying to do. So that is quite complicated. So you need to really understand if you're dealing with someone with those things. I'll take you another example of a medium risk jurisdiction. So let me take India, for example. And I add India as well. Now, India is a medium risk jurisdiction. There are no FATF or anything. But as far as AUSTRAC's guidance is concerned, even if it is a medium risk jurisdiction, they expect that to be treated as a high risk country. So in your risk calculator, this will become a high risk country. Anyway, I am removing Russia, Papua New Guinea, and India, and then I'm just adding the others. So you need to answer if you will deal with this. Yes, 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 and then yes. And I continue my assessment. So you've done the answers. So at any time, if you want to go and review your answers, you're most welcome to go back and you can review all your answers. So that is definitely there. You can continue your assessment. Once you've done this, the next step we are moving is the AML CTF program related questions. This is to customize the AML CTF program to your entity. Now, all along, this is all customizable to your practice, your interest. So these are some of the basic obligations with AUSTRAC. So if you're providing a designated service, you'll have to enroll with AUSTRAC within 28 days. So for all the new entities, that will be 29th of July. And then if you go back and add a new designated service, let's say after 1 year, you're providing a new designated service, then within 28 days of providing that designated service, you need to go and update your enrollment with AUSTRAC. Then you need to have some governance and other structures. You can do them as well. So that is all provided here. You have obligations to report suspicious matters and things like that. The first and foremost question is, does reporting group concept apply to your business? So what is a reporting group? So if 2 or more entities join together to have common risk management practice, then that is there. So if you answer as yes, then you can list down the name of those entities. If it is a no, you can move forward. Now, this is the most important question I would say from a governance perspective. Are you a single employee practice from governance perspective? What this means is that whether you may have staff, but you are the single person or a solo practitioner or the owner of your practice, that you may have staff, but you make decisions on every onboarding of client or every service that you're providing to your client. Or you may be a 2-partner firm, but your other partner is not involved in any of this. You take the full responsibility of being an AML CTF go-to person. So this means you are the AML CTF compliance officer, you are the senior manager, and you perform the role of a governing body. So most of us, which we see is all a solo practitioner or a single practice where the responsibilities is one person. So in that case, I would like you to answer as yes. This is very important because your MyTRAC workflow is all linked to this. So think of it. So you may have staff, that is absolutely fine, but you take all responsibility for all the relationship with your client, then you will answer this as yes. Now you may have staff could be even overseas staff, and what's the number of staff you have? So which we just say with the employer engaged, so it could be your part-time contractor, intern, whatever it is, give the number here. Then because I'm a solo business, so I will be the same person. So there's only one person who acts as a senior manager. There's only one person who will act as a governing body member. As a compliance officer being identified, yes, he will be the person responsible. Have you outsourced the role of a compliance officer? Small practices definitely don't have the budget to outsource these. And the purpose of having tools which MyTRAC is helping you is basically to make your life easy as a compliance officer as well. So you really don't need to, have another compliance officer if you're a very small or a, budget constraint, or you are able to do it, because MyTRAC will take care of all these things. Now, if you have other people like an office manager, admin, reception, or IT support, you answer that as yes. Now, certain things will have to be a yes. You need to perform initial and ongoing due diligence on all your current and future personnel who play in AML CTF roles. So that will be an yes. If you have offshore employees, so let's say you have offshore employees in Philippines, India, or anywhere, even one or two, then you need to answer that as yes. Now, before everybody whom you engage or your practice engages going forward from 1st of July, you need to do a due diligence on them. That means you also need to provide them training. And then if you're going to give them access to MyTRAC tool, because they have some client-facing role, then you need to provide them with all the training before granting them access to these platforms. I do this, I save as draft, and then I'm going to the next one. Here we're talking about clients. So the first question is, as part of your policy, are you okay to do customer due diligence prior to commencement of a designated service? The answer has to be an yes, because if you don't do customer due diligence, then you're not meeting the obligations under the law. But because we have to give you a policy, we want you to be sure that you know what your obligations are. Now, other than the initial due diligence, you also have to do ongoing monitoring. So that would be an yes. High-risk customers. So for example, I gave the example in the country jurisdiction as Papua New Guinea. So for Papua New Guinea, it's a high-risk customer. Then what happens is every 12 months, you need to do an ongoing due diligence. The MyTRAC tool, when you onboard the client, will remind you prior to that to say this customer's due diligence is due shortly. So you are requested to do an ongoing due diligence on them. So that will automatically happen. In the other video, you will be able to see how we are doing that. So that will be by default 12 months. Now, ongoing CDD for medium risk customers, right? So you can choose between 2 or 3 years. There's no strict standard. It's a risk-based approach. AUSTRAC starter kit guidance is very generic to say 1, 2, and 3, but you can choose 3 years or 2 years. So let's say if I choose 3 years, then I have options for low risk customers as 3, 4, and 5. Then I only get 4 and 5. Now, if I want, I can choose this as 5. Remember, this is a risk-based approach. You are defining a policy. That's absolutely fine. Now, the next question in customer due diligence is, now, how do we identify clients? So MyTRAC tool has something very unique, which no other tool has. So as an accountant, you are used to verifying client identity for the purposes of meeting your TPB, the Tax Practitioner Board requirements. So you can continue to do things in certain way, which we explain in our other, 1 July post onboarding webinar. We tell you how that is managed. But if you have if you have verified a client and you are with a reliable and an independent source, then it is not a compulsory item that you need to go and do a third party check, with another agency on the document verification service or biometric. So you have the option of comforting yourselves. It's a risk-based approach. We have spoken about that in our other recordings. You can go and have a look at it, how you operate the tool. So mostly this will be a yes. And then we come to the next part. So 2 more questions where you will by default mention this as yes. So these are your mandatory obligations under the AML CTF Act. So we would definitely want you to read this. So ensure that these all comes as part of your policy. And the next part is also, talking about, the previous one is about suspicious matter report, reporting to AUSTRAC, submitting your annual compliance report. This is about maintaining your program by meeting all the minimum obligations, such as, conducting a periodic effectiveness test, an independent evaluation at least every 3 years, record keeping for at least 7 years, continue to maintain an enrollment with AUSTRAC. So you're confirming that this is all there, and then I continue to submit. This is submitted. Now, what happens next steps? Once you submit, all these things will come in, and then you'll be able to do it. But remember, I would like you to review all your answers before you submit, because once you submit, you will not be able to change any of your response because we take a point in time approach. So let's say we are proceeding towards 1 July or the early stages of July or anytime you're doing it, you are sure that this is what your business looks like. So remember, that's why we ask, are you likely to do anything in the next 12 months or in the next 6 months? So the reasonable assumption is nothing is going to change. So it's a point in time approach. This is what is my business model is going to be. This is my appetite. Now, if things change, once we go live, we go later, after a few months, circumstances change, then we can, of course, go and update this. But once you have submitted here, the documents get generated, so you will not be able to change them. So what I do is I click on submit. It says, are you sure you want to submit? Once you submit, your assessment will be finalized. And I say yes. There we go. So that opens up to you something more about the product platform for MyTRAC. So we have another webinar exactly what you do and how you do things with this. But then here I'm just going to tell you how this one is there. So at the first instance, the risk assessment is what you have answered. The program documents, you will not get the program documents unless it comes to us. We do a review of all the program documents before we do it. So this is what is the screen that will be there. So we get an automatic alert. So I'm just waiting for my team to confirm this. So they will be doing it shortly. I think it will be done now. And then they confirm. Now let's refresh the status. Oh, there we go. We got it. Right? So you get your risk assessment, policy, and other things. So in this example, because you've not paid, so it is pending, but once you pay, you will be able to, download and approve the documents. But what you can do is you can straight away view the documents. So I'm clicking on the risk assessment. And if you remember at the start, so it'll have all the version control and everything. You can approve this later. So I get my risk assessment document, which is quite comprehensive. Remember, we did the risk assessment. So I'm going to say, go to these yes or no. So I said yes to certain things, no to certain things. So these are the designated services. Now, the next part is the AUSTRAC enrollment. So the MLTF risk assessment document exactly shows what's the professional service that needs to be clicked under AUSTRAC. So you have the answers to that. So asset management means, see, this is what the item would say. This is what AUSTRAC enrollment says. This is what the law says. This is the description. So it's quite complicated, but we have made it very, very simple for you so that you're able to go and see this. So like this, you can do it. Now, after the risk assessment is done, I also say, what's my appetite for doing high value transactions? What's my appetite for physical transactions, right? All those things are basically available for me to go and see. So I just say this, do it. If you want to go to the top, just click on it and I go. The other thing was the country risk assessment, which if you remember, we did. So remember the countries that we added, Australia, New Zealand, UK, US, and all these items come in here directly. So you also get to see your AML CTF policy documents that talks about what it is. So it will just come in a moment. And then that's what it is. So you have everything done for your AML CTF policy documents, and all those things are available. And then, we also say what it is. So we do this and it talks about every single item that needs to be there. And then, we make and keep records. We do all those things. So we answered, we are not a reporting group. So that also comes in here. So all these items are taken care. Then you have policy documents for your governance, for customer due diligence and personal due diligence. You'll be able to see more of this in our next, which is our post onboarding webinar video, which we also have on our YouTube channel. So you can go and look at it to understand how the training, the customer due diligence, billing, payment, personal, and other things work. Now, quickly, what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is tell you how the AUSTRAC enrollment happens. So let's get started. And then I'm sharing it on my screen here. I will be quick. I think it's coming up. Yeah, there we go. All good. So let's get started here. So You can scan this QR code to go to AUSTRAC Online, or you can Google search AUSTRAC Online and you will get this. All right, so sign up to enroll a new business. Click on it, enter your email ID. That puts your email ID. Click on I'm not a robo. Click on verify. You will receive an email like this that says go and verify. So quickly you can verify that. It's fairly straightforward. Once you verify, you can set up two-factor authentication. So it could be either a Google Authenticator or you can receive OTP. I've seen sometimes there have been issues for people when they try to do the authenticator, but I leave it to you. It can vary depending on your connection and other things, or you can set up OTP. Now you have 13 sections that you need to fill in. So first is introduction. Now, when you start registering, you have until 14 days from the time you create an account to complete this whole process. Till then, AUSTRAC Online will save them as a draft. Otherwise, it will permanently delete these information. All right. So we move on from here. The next one is we need to answer what is that you do. For most of the practices, the first one is a yes, which says you are an establishment in Australia that carries on this business. And then this all talks about having foreign affiliation for your practice. So most of the times it is no. If you are a reporting group, remember we did this particular question in the risk assessment and in the AML program. So if you are a reporting group, you say yes, otherwise it will be a no. Moving on, then you need to select business and professional services as the type, and then the subcategory will be an accountant. And then it'll ask you some questions whether you provide designated service such as virtual asset services or remittance services. Most of them don't do that. Otherwise, you would have already been covered under the AML CTF Act. So you say no to them. And then it talks about the various, select all the professional services that your practice provides. Now, you remember in the risk assessment document, I did show you exactly what AUSTRAC said. So asset management, business structuring services. So this is what they give it here. But then the law is explained elsewhere. So we have made it very simple for you to refer the risk assessment document and then you do it. Indicate when you commence or started providing the service. So the 1st of July is the answer because you are all starting new. And then if you're doing it later, then you go back and update what it is. So I've also given a screenshot of what this means is. So you've said yes, you can see it on the screen where exactly you can take this from the MyTRAC risk assessment. So we have, of course, simplified things for you. Now, in the business details section, you can put in your name. Look, if you are a PTY, most of you will be to begin with as a PTY, do it. But if you are a trust, I suggest you enter the details manually if you're not able to find, because it does take time. So if you're not a member of a corporate group or not an ADI, which is like a bank, or not in the financial sector, not a foreign company, you say no. Association, so what kind of company are you? Are you a body corporate? So most of the time you could either be a body corporate or a partnership, sole trader, or a trust. So keep in all the details handy because there's quite a lot to be filled if you're a trust and it becomes more complex. You also need to understand who the beneficial owner is. So if you say it's a trust, then who holds more than 25% or more? The end person, those details have to be there. So if it is more than one person, you have family trust, this and that. So you need to really understand who owns it. So you need to provide those information as well here. So keep in all the information handy, including their name, date of birth, and other things. Then you need to provide business contact such as your address, place of address. So this will auto type with Google, but if that doesn't happen, you can start to enter these address manually. If you also have to provide the telephone number and email address. So if you have a landline, you can give it, or you can give your mobile number. Provide your email ID where you're reachable or contactable. It doesn't necessarily need to be the same email ID that you used for AUSTRAC Online, but preferably I'm sure you will use a work email that is consistent for you to manage. Now, if you have a website, it is prudent to put the website of your entity here. And then a few more questions are there in terms of what's the size of your business. So how many employees, full-time employees is there, FTEs, full-time employees. And then they also ask you what's the turnover of your business. So it's under $250,000 or between 250 to a million to 5, etc. So choose the right one. And then are you eligible for a tax treatment as a small business entity? So that is, if your revenue has been less than $10,000, then you can definitely, sorry, $10 million, apologies, then you will do that. Now, coming to the next important point is the AML CTF compliance officer. Now, if you're a single practice, then it is all you. But if you have a practice with multiple partners or having a large team, you have another person who is eligible. If you're doing it, then you can provide their information. Please note, you're making a legal declaration to say that you understand the person appointed meets the requirement, and if there's any change, you will, inform AUSTRAC within 14 days. So you're making a legal declaration. Please keep that in mind. Industry contribution levy. So if you're more than $100 million, then you will have an industry contribution levy. So in most cases, this is not applicable. But then if they won't ever get in touch, who the contact person has to be, so you can choose to give the compliance officer as the point of contact. Finally, you will have a summary of all those things. You will be able to see everything that you filled in so far, and then you can declare and then submit. Once you submit, it will give you a pop-up to say this is the enrollment as a reference number, but it will take up to 5 minutes to receive an email from AUSTRAC Contact Center that will give you your name is now enrolled, and then you have an AUSTRAC contact number and other things. So remember that, this is a very important document. You need to take a copy of this, save it somewhere in your shared drive or folder. MyTRAC also provides you option to save these details, your AUSTRAC account number and other things that can be done, and that ensures that you are enrolled. Remember, if you are already providing designated service, the last day to enroll and not face any enforcement action from AUSTRAC as part of the tranche 2 is 29th of July 2026. With this, we come to the conclusion of this particular session. If you are enrolled and you are a subscriber at MyTRAC, we request you to go and do the next step. So you can reach out to us at help@mytrac.com.au if you have any questions, or you are happy and you made the payment. The next steps, what needs to be done. We have live webinars happening until the 31st of July 2026 every single day. And then that is also available within the tool. You can see where the webinars are available. If you want to have a recorded view of the webinar, that's also available on our YouTube channel. You can go and have a look at it. I wish each and every one of you all the very best, and thank you so much today for joining us for this session. Meet you all another time.